So, but and I tell you what, I felt worse the next morning because we had quite a bit of wine. There we had some fantastic food, and then we got back to the Airbnb place we booked, had more wine, and the next morning I was woken up by this somebody knocking on the door. So like kind of half naked, open the door. There's this Bedouin girl in hijab, and I'm like, what? And she's like, we've come to clean the room. You meant to be out by now. So we're like, oh, right, okay. So with the world's worst hangover, got turfed out of our apartment and went to get our rental car. And um, I get this trip. It's been like I've had angels helping me on the way, and the angel that helped me next was this very husky voiced, sultry, I guess like a Yemeni Jewish girl or something at the car rental place on Leonard Cohen Street, and she just took one look at me and she goes, "You need coffee? I'll get you coffee." and she was really kind and nice. And actually, when we came back, she gave us a cake that she'd made as well. So yeah, and so we hired this car, and the first thing we did is went to get laundry done because we got loads of stinking laundry. So we literally went round the corner, put the laundry in, and then the car wouldn't start. And we've only just hired the bloody thing. So we had to call like the breakdown guy who took about an hour or two to get there. So I'm sat there with recovering from a hangover by a laundry in Beersheba. And yeah, thinking, God, this ain't exactly a holiday. But he fixed it. And then we drove into the deserts. And Thomas had wanted to go to the deserts because he's never been to a desert before. But also, I wanted to go because I thought I've done the religious stuff. Let's just get away from the religion. Let's do the secular thing. Although, in a way, do you know what? Retreating into the desert, isn't that the most religious thing of all? Like, isn't that what they all did? Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, Elijah, they all go to the deserts to think about stuff. So maybe, I had to go to the desert. And we went, um, we went to Sede Boker, which is the kibbutz that David Ben Gurion lived on. And I've been before, actually. In fact, I stayed the night on Sede Boker once because a friend of mine, Simeon Kovachev, was living there at the time, and I stayed in the volunteer block for a night with him. Um, but and I pretended I was Bulgarian. I spoke only Bulgarian to him, and there was an English guy, and he never realised it was English. It was quite funny. But anyway, yeah, in Sedibaka, they've got a little museum with David Ben Gurion's house. David Ben Gurion was the founder of Israel, by the way. And interesting because he was a great man. I mean, he was, well, the founder of the nation. And yet he lived very humbly, very simply, in a little kind of not much more than a hut, but it was bigger than the others because he had a library. He had quite a big library, which and that's where he lived. And I've always admired David Ben Gurion. A very like Yankali Shemesh. He was a man who was a proud Zionist, but also lived with Arabs and respected Arabs, and I respect that. And he was one of that great generation of politicians after the war that really helped build a new world. By God, we could do with a David Ben Gurion or two now, particularly in Israel. But we just got some real dross. But anyway, and then we went to Maktesh Ramon, so Tom could see the Great Canyon there, the Great Chasm. Oh, actually, we went to David Ben Gurion's grave as well. So we went to the museum, the grave, and then Maktesh Ramon. And then it was getting dark, and we went to our accommodation for the night, which was a Bedouin tent out in the desert. Not my choice, but Tom wanted to do the whole Bedouin tent experience. And I'll be fair, it was genuine. It was a real Bedouin tent with a real family. There was a girl, she spoke some English, so she, welcomed us to that. But the dad was there as well, and they brought some amazing tea, and we sat by a fire in the desert. We met a school teacher he was staying out there as well. I think he was from Tel Aviv way somewhere. I'm not sure when. And we had a chat with him and stayed out in the desert. And it was, I mean, in some ways it hasn't changed much since the time of the Bible. And I went out. I need to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, so I left the tent, and it was, I would have guessed about 4 or 5 in the morning, something like that, just as the sun was rising, perhaps, and the call to prayer was sounding across this desolate desert, and there was something incredibly powerful about it. And I thought, that's where Islam began. This is like the real Islam. It's not all these kind of fake Salafi guys in Bradford and Bolton and that, with all their rules and that. It's literally man and God and the stars and the rock, and that's it. In a desert landscape. And of course, Islam. I mean, there are different schools as to where exactly Islam started. The accepted version is Mecca and Saudi Arabia, but there are other theories, and they would say it actually started very near the Negev desert. So who knows? Maybe, but I thought I glimpsed something really authentic there. It was nice. It wasn't a beautiful call on call to prayer on the muezzin, is it? But do you know what? It was real. So we got up and we went to Avdat, but there wasn't a lot of time. I think it was, yes, because it was Shabbat the next day, so everything was shutting really early. So we went to the Dead Sea. We tried to go to Masada, but it was shut. But I mean, the Dead Sea, amazing scenery. I mean, and Tom had a dip because he said he really wanted a dip, and then after he had a dip, he never wanted one again. Exactly how I reacted when I went in the Dead Sea in Jordan. But the scenery was incredible. I've just got these images of these amazing desert landscapes and just traveling around together, driving through the desert together like some great American road trip or something. And we ended up at a place called Sapir, and it's a moshav, which is another sort of communal settlement in the desert. And we had our accommodation booked there, and it was a wonderful, like, hippie place. I think it was called Happy Land or something, and it was just this dude's like apartment, but it was this wonderful hippie apartment with a record player for playing vinyl LPs, and we had like Cat Stevens on and Bob Dylan and that kind of stuff, and it was just cool. It was the coolest place we stayed, and it was also nice because I'd had a prayer. So I had a friend up in Bradford who had been going through a tough time, but we fell out October, not that like in 24, but 23, and she'd given an excuse and stopped talking, and it wasn't the real reason, I know. But when I was in Jerusalem, I just sent her a message saying I prayed for you at Al Aqsa, and well, very well paid for her at Al Aqsa, and she got in touch, and we had our first conversation in well over a year. So that was a little miracle that kind of came from the pilgrimage, and yeah, we had a wonderful night there, and then the next day we went on a kind of different sort of pilgrimage. So we drove across the desert to Kibbutz Revavim, which was the kibbutz where I had stayed. We met Zohar, and we had a little walk around the kibbutz. So Tom had never seen the kibbutz before, and obviously for me, it's always special to go back and see what's changed and what haven't. It doesn't change much, but they were developing a bit in around like the north bit and around the museum. But it was it was a wonderful place, Revavim, and it was great to go back. And we also, Zohar was talking about her father and her mother. And then we went to their grave, and I laid some stones on the grave and paid tribute to, well, a wonderful couple who were very kind to me in my younger years. So that was that. And also, Zohar was paying tribute to Paul, who is a wonderful, wonderful man. And we bid goodbye to Zohar, and then we drove on to somewhere I'd never been before, and it's the bit right next to the Gaza Strip. So we almost followed the line of the Gaza Strip within a mile, and again, we were a mile less away from this great conflict, and it was as if nothing was happening. We were in this area of large flat fields, not a big population. It was almost like East Anglia. The only sign you got was we passed an army base, and there were about 40 or 50 tanks all lined up. But you would not have thought we were anywhere near a conflict. And also, whenever we went in like petrol stations and stuff, it was all Arabs serving because it was Shabbat, I guess. And it was all Bedouin working in them. So, yeah. But we went to the site of the Nova Music Festival, and that is where on October the 7th, there was a musical festival being held, and 400 people were massacred. And I could talk about it, but I'm not going to. What I want to do is play what I recorded at the time, because it was a very powerful place, and that's more immediate. Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here. Normally I don't do videos in situ in terms of the audio. I just take footage and then talk about it after, but where I am today is a very powerful place. I'm really quite moved, so I wanted to catch that. I'm in the middle of the Nova Festival site, where just over a year ago 400 young people lost their lives, and you read about stuff on TV. Well, you watch stuff on TV, you read about the news, but it's not the same as when you actually see it for yourself. And this is one of the most incredibly moving places I've ever been, because it's so very recent, because each and every photo of these are kind of people like those I knew, people very similar to myself. A lot of, it's kind of a happy place. There was a lot of people who travelled, who fought for peace, who were just secular and enjoyed life, and died when they should have been safe at a music festival. Now, I know some people will say that there are two sides to every story, and there are. And if I could go inside Gaza, I would, and I would talk about that. But I can't. And now it's not the time for that. It is always wrong to take a life. Always. It is not an act of national liberation to massacre people. Even if your political aims are just and moral. And one can question that another day. But to go in and massacre unarmed people is wrong. And that sounds like a very abstract thing to say, but when you actually see, hear, and you read the life stories of the people who were murdered, they went to some containers over there. People were hiding them for hours before they were actually found and massacred. Over there was a bar. People were hiding behind the bar, and they were all massacred. Perhaps a miracle is that 3,000 people actually managed to escape, and the police, and there were very few, there was 30, managed to save most lives, and that's not talked about a lot. But the attack started at 6:30 in the morning. They got here at 8:30, and the IDF did not come until the afternoon to liberate the site, as it were. And that is a failing of the government to protect its people. And of course, Israel, uniquely, was a country set up to protect its people from pogroms, from a Holocaust. So here that means probably more than it may do in other places. I think the political elite of Israel should be held accountable, as well as the people who did it. Because the people who did it are probably dead now. And they have their own story to tell. But for the meantime, the silence here is deafening. And so that was the Nova Music Festival. And we went back to Beersheba. We stayed the night in a weird kind of campsite type thing with yurts. It was horrible. It would have been nice in the summer. It was just cold and a bit skanky. And then that was it. Went back up to Tel Aviv. Spent a day in Tel Aviv. Just, around the old German colony, chilling out. We had a couple of beers. And then met Ferrell and flew back. And that was the end of the Israel trip. Reflecting on it all, it was an incredible, incredible trip. The pilgrimage was something special. I think what marked it as being very different from my Camino de Santiago walk and the Italy walk is that it's a change in direction almost for me. I'd done those for me. I knew that I needed to do them, and they were for my spiritual development. What was different here is although it was for me in a way, it was as much for other people. I think I'd sensed very early on that Ferrell needed to go to Israel. She needed to do that. But also, Yael and Golan, they've put so much work into this project. They need people to go on it. And, the war has come at the wrong time, and it's, disrupted what was a burgeoning and very positive project. And I wanted to say, look, I want to show some solidarity, but also, I always called it a peace pilgrimage because there is something incredibly powerful about symbols. And the fact is, during a conflict, a Christian, a Muslim, and two Jews can walk together to Jerusalem, I think is powerful. And it is an example to the world. And yeah, it's not a big one. I've not transformed or revolutionized the world, but I think it maybe has made a small difference. There's conversations I've had with people on all sides, pro-Israel people and pro-Palestinian people, And it's something that they can both engage with, because the problem is that the subject is so divisive that people, they're in one camp or the other, and they just repeat their litany, and they don't listen, and they don't have any empathy for the other side. Whereas what we were doing, because it was a bit out of the box, and it wasn't directly political, people listened to it. And it's, we came up with some stories that didn't fit any narratives. Like, Ferial, for example, went to Al-Aqsa and met a load of Palestinians in Al-Aqsa. And, they were saying, yeah, it's great that there's, the world shows solidarity for us. But they didn't like the boycott. And she said, why don't you like the boycott? And they're like, well, because we all work in these places. So you boycott Israel, you're boycotting us. We suffer. And I think you don't hear that, ever. And, another one is that I mentioned this synagogue, this Persian synagogue that she found very powerful. She actually had a dream about it before. So she went back to the Persian synagogue, went in, and got talking to the rabbi, and he invited her to his house for Shabbat lunch. And I mean, she was clean, she wasn't Jewish, she's a Muslim and that. And his daughter was called Ariel, which is the Hebrew form of Fariel, and they've become big mates. I'm like, wow, isn't that wonderful? And isn't that bridge building? That's what it's all about. And so I feel so blessed with this, but I feel it because I can see the change it's wrought in other people. And Ferial, she's had a few struggles of late, and since she's come back, she's so much more confident. And she's so much more confident because of what she achieved. And her friend, well, our mutual friend, she said, my God, that's the old Ferial's returned. And that's like, I think that's worth celebrating, Pilgrimage can change your life. It can do it, and it's done it with me, but there was somebody else that it's done it with. Like I say, I was now in touch again with somebody that I'd not spoken to for well over a year, and she got back in touch when she knew I was on pilgrimage. Similarly, Ferial had she had like a Lebanese friend who she'd not been in touch with for a year or two, and she got, when she was staying in Latrun, she got these sense that like Saint Charbel was speaking to her, which is a bit weird because she's not Christian, but and a sense that it was something about Lebanon. So when she got to Al-Aqsa, she prayed for this chap and told him, and he got back in touch with her, and now they're in touch again. It really does seem to have touched quite a few people. So that's that. And that's the positive, and the negative. I do fear for Israel sometimes as a country. The reasons are obvious, I mean, we have a ceasefire as I speak at the moment. Will it hold? I'm not expecting much. There's a lot of hatred there. And beyond its borders, a lot of the world has decided it's in one camp or the other. So whilst you've got two camps, you'll never get peace because there's no interest in getting out of your mindset and trying to understand the other. And whilst that's the case, you never have peace. Always peace only happens when you try to walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And that's not happening. But also within Israeli society, there are very deep divisions. And actually, like a week or so ago, I went to a talk in a synagogue by an Israeli academic, and he was saying the same. He was saying, about these divisions within Israeli society. And I think what Golan had said was right. I think maybe, the glue that had held Israel together seems to have not be there now. And who knows what the future will hold? I don't know. It is what it is. But it's a very powerful pilgrimage, and I hope more can come from it. So, we raised £400 for an interfaith organisation, so that was nice. And also, spoken to some major figures in the interfaith scene in Britain, and they are eager to do the pilgrimage now. We set the example that it can be done, so they're saying, well, maybe we'll organise, uh, a pilgrimage that is, a bit bigger and a bit more widely publicized. So, yeah, I think we set something in motion that can achieve something. But on a personal level, I think as well, it was quite powerful with me and my son, and I needed the time in the desert with him afterwards. He had his first time as an independent traveler in those days while I was walking in Tel Aviv. He did well, and I'm proud of him. And I actually said to him, I said, look, the thing is, I don't think I've got anything more to teach you when it comes to travel. You're ready to go off on your own. And I think that the best teachers are the ones that make themselves redundant. And I seem to have done that with him. He's good at what he does, and I'm proud of him, even if he's a bit rude sometimes. So that's that. It was a wonderful trip. I do hope you enjoyed sharing it with me in these videos, and well, as always, keep traveling.